everybody. Thanks so much for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for the great organizing. So I'm going to try to give you a budget overview. I'm going to start at the federal budget, and I'm hopefully going to make the connection between federal spending, state budgets, and our local communities. And I'm going to talk about two budgets primarily because there are two budget struggles happening at this very moment. And here I have the story of two budgets, but really it could be the tragedy of two budgets because it's this much of an epic and this much of a struggle. So FY11, that's the budget year we're currently in. October 1 to September 30th, that's the federal budget year. But we never passed it. So we're in our sixth continuing resolution, which is what Congress does when they can't pass a budget. And the last two of those six continuing resolutions chopped off $10 billion out of that $3.8 trillion budget blueprint. And now, scheduled for this Friday, should be the final budget resolution, but it doesn't look like we're going to have it. It looks like we're going to have a seventh continuing resolution, which is aiming to chop off another $12 billion. That will be $22 billion before the budget's actually passed. So this particular continuing resolution chopping off $12 billion would effectively end Weed and Seed, which is a youth garden program which helps young people in urban areas create garden plots. It's going to end it immediately if this continuing resolution passes, and this is what's at stake. Now, we're also going to talk about something called H.R. 1. H.R. 1 was the House Republican plan in response to the fiscal year 2011 budget, and that's looking at actually cutting upwards of $100 billion if we were to look at it over a year in social spending. Now, what's not being touched is the Department of Defense, or military spending, and that actually will exceed $726 billion this year. And this continuing resolution that I just talked about that will effectively end programs like Weed and Seed by this Friday, this would fund the Department of Defense and actually increase it by 1.5% for the rest of the year. Okay? Now, the second budget also, yeah, we can boo. Also up is the 2012 budget. Now, we should be talking about the 2012 budget right now. It's what President Obama presented to the nation on February 14th. That's $3.7 trillion. But something that just happened this morning is that the House Budget Chairman, Paul Ryan, put out a blueprint that looks at 10 years beginning with this budget, and looks at cutting $6.2 trillion in the next decade. $6.2 trillion. These are unfathomably large numbers. To make $1 trillion, you'd have to earn $1 million for a million years. Now we're talking about $6.2 trillion of budget savings, and it'll begin in fiscal year 2012. And for things like Pell Grants, which we all care about, Pell Grant levels would go back pre-2008 levels. We would see an incredible sea change in social spending. Okay, and I'm going to talk a lot about dollars, but I want to put it in this larger context, which is that this is a fight for, of course, our budgets and for the trillions of dollars that will have an impact in our local communities, but it's also a fight about the role of government and the role of government in maintaining a common good, or our democracy, because there are conservative ideologues that would have us actually shrink government down to the place where it really can't do any kind of good. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so what is federal funding, and what the heck does it do in our community? This is a small list, right? It's Head Start and it's Title I. So Head Start is the pre-K childhood education program. Title I, of course, is K through 12. It evens the scales for low-income communities. It's other kinds of things. It's the Community Development Block Grant, which provides clean water infrastructure, roads, bridges. It's Medicaid, Medicare. TANF is the temporary assistance for needy families. The SNAP is, of course, food stamps. CHIP is the Children's Health Insurance Program. That's the kind of role that the federal government plays and federal spending plays as it comes to states like Massachusetts and then down to communities like Amherst and Northampton. Now, H.R. 1, again, H.R. 1 is an extreme, right now, extreme view of what might happen in 2011, but it's not absolutely out of the question. Remember, we've already lost $10 billion from the first version of 2011. We're on our way to losing $22 billion, and H.R. 1 would take us then $80 billion more. And it would mean extraordinary things for states like Massachusetts. 23,000 fewer Head Start places, 90,000 people would lose health care because the community health care centers that serve them would be closed, and Pell Grant funding for 135,000 students would be eliminated or cut back. That's H.R. 1. And the only way we're going to battle it is because of great organizing like what's happening today and in colleges and universities across the country. And of course, there are the associated jobs. Okay, so here's the whole $3.7 trillion pie for 2012. A lot of it is mandatory. That's how it always is. It's 2/3 mandatory spending. Those are need-based programs. Those are the programs that expand or contract depending on those who need them. The discretionary portion of the pie is what I want to focus on. That's the orange slice. That's the slice that's primarily under attack. It's 1/3 of the budget, and it's how we imagine federal spending landing in our communities primarily, besides the entitlement programs. And this is how it happens. The president gets a budget to Congress, Congress passes a budget resolution, and then it goes through a process of decision-making, and it goes to committees like the Labor, Health and Human Services, and Education Committee, which is projected to get $885 billion this year. Of course, it's going to be less than that if this budget struggle is not successful. So what will that what impact does that have on a state like Massachusetts? Well, for Head Start, we'll see a little bit of a bump. And that looks good on paper, but if you have to also understand that in Massachusetts, we have about a 100% gap in the number of kids who are eligible for Head Start and the number of kids who get it. So we're already behind in states like Massachusetts and in almost every other state across the country. In LIHEAP, the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, that's projected to get, even in this budget blueprint presented by President Obama, not the cuts, that's projected to get more than 50% cut. And for Massachusetts, that'll mean more than a 50% cut of that kind of money coming in to our local community centers so then it can be distributed to seniors and families who need help paying their home energy bills. And we already know from this winter that people didn't have enough money to keep their houses warm. And families were saying they already had to make a choice between paying rent and heating their homes. So we already know it's not enough. And programs like temporary assistance for needy families, that'll be zeroed out, which means it won't grow with inflation. So that dollar that families got will be eroded. Now, this is the discretionary pie. Remember that orange slice. This is how it breaks out. Look at the military spending pie. That's 57%. Look at 1% for food. That's all food assistance coming into our communities. Look at, let's pick one. Let's look at 6% for energy, environment, and science. That's every national park, every bit of research and development for HIV and AIDS drugs and relief for those infected with HIV and AIDS. That's every single dollar going to community centers, and it's 6%. Now, look at this line chart, if you will, and look back to 1977, because there was a time in our country where things looked different. There was a time where domestic spending outpaced military spending. And I have two circles because the fate of the budgets have yet to be decided. Right? If indeed the 2011 and 2012 struggles don't play out, then we will see that yellow line decrease precipitously. And if indeed the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan continue, and if indeed the Defense Department continues to get expanded over time, that red line will go up. And so we will start to see the kind of disparity that we had during the Cold War in the 1980s. And this is just a look at the fact that discretionary spending has not been out of control. One of the major conversation points in a conservative agenda is that President Obama has an unbridled checkbook, that he can't control social spending. But indeed, it's been about the expansion of mandatory spending in order to catch the folks who've needed it in a recession. That is the role of government, and we shouldn't be ashamed at spending that money. It is about a healthy economy. Okay, I want to tell you just a couple more stories. There's a new paradigm in Congress. It's called security versus non-security. It's a false paradigm. Security spending is called Veterans Affairs, which of course people who serve the nation are entitled, but it's Veterans Affairs, Homeland Security, and Defense. That is slated to not get cut, and it's slated to make the old pie actually squeezed into even a smaller percent. So this security paradigm will be uncut, while the rest of the efficiencies or the cost savings or all those other kinds of euphemistic ways we're talking about budget slashes will come out of the social spending that's already getting a smaller and smaller slice of our discretionary budget. And one of the things that's up for grabs is a 5-year cap on social spending. And a 5-year cap on social spending would have it be flatline and not be able to grow with inflation. And the orange line is the growth with inflation. The yellow line is capped. So already we'll see a receding in dollar value. And I'm going to wrap it up right now. This is not about spending. It's really more about revenue. You're going to hear a lot about this. But my colleague, Anders, who's here and working out of the econ department, found that if corporations actually paid the 35% that they're supposed to pay, we would have actually made $150 billion more. If they paid, in 2010, if they paid 40%, which is what they used to pay, we would have made $230 billion more. So that's what's at stake, and thanks so much.